Today, April 29th, a new UFO whistleblower has come forward, Matthew Brown. Brown is a former U.S. national security official who served as a policy advisor to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, a technical advisor to the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, and a program advisor at the Department of State. Here's a tweet Jeremy Corbell posted to introduce this breaking news, and I quote, "In 2024, an enigmatic term began to percolate among a small group of UAP investigators. The name was Immaculate Constellation. Anyone who dared to even utter that term would put their own lives at risk, according to persons familiar with the program. IMCON, the abbreviated version of the term, was brought to the attention of Congress. Members were told it was a cover term for an unacknowledged special access program housed within the executive branch, specifically under the control of the White House. IMCON was supposedly a highly secretive program that relied on artificial intelligence to secretly scour classified servers used by the U.S. military and its intelligence agencies to search for and snatch images of UAP encounters. A report about IMCON, written by an unknown policy advisor, was provided to Congress by Jeremy Corbell months prior to the start of a 2024 public hearing before a House subcommittee. The anonymous author of the report, who had been surreptitiously introduced to key House members by Corbell, had indicated he was willing to testify if requested to do so. A very curious series of events unfolded at the hearing, but in the end, the source of the Immaculate Constellation report was largely ignored, and the origin of the report itself was grossly distorted by members. A spokesperson for the Pentagon denied that any program by the name had ever existed within the Department of Defense. After many months of excruciating discussion and debate, the author of IMCON report is now ready to reveal what he knows, how he knows it, and who he is. In this episode of Weaponized, part 1 of 3, Jeremy and George speak face-to-face with the previously anonymous source of the IMCON report. The person who wrote the report explains where he worked and in what capacities, how he was first exposed to the term Immaculate Constellation, and why he made the decision to come forward in spite of what could be very serious repercussions. Now, let's dive into Matthew Brown's interview with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp.
Is it ironic you have to put your face out with us to protect yourself at this point? That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
This is absolutely what I did not want to do.
After watching the entire interview with whistleblower Matthew Brown, an unavoidable takeaway is this guy is so sober and exudes that he really doesn't want to do this on any level. He is very reluctantly coming forward like this, and it shows. And he must be doing it to protect himself, because this is not something that he seems to have any enjoyment in whatsoever. And you'll have that takeaway if you watch the interview.
But what are the legal implications of what you're about to talk to us today? Tell me the gravity right now. What are you facing? I want our audience to understand what it means for you to talk to us right now. What could happen to you?
My hope is that the stakes are not paid out, but they are life imprisonment and the possibility of execution.
That says it all regarding the stakes he could potentially endure if he is to be prosecuted for coming forward publicly on this alleged UFO program, Immaculate Constellation. And this speaks to why his tone is so serious throughout the interview. Let's cover how whistleblower Matthew Brown came upon the Immaculate Constellation program. the way he came upon it, it's called spillage. It's when you see something that is of a compartmentalized or nature that you are not specifically cleared to see, and you're exposed to something and it's like, holy shit, what is this? But I'll allow Matthew to explain how this unfolded for him.
Gateway. This is the entrance point. What happened? How did it happen? What did you see? What did you think?
Yeah, so the first exposure, or the exposure to Immaculate Constellation, happened on a shared server that was shared by all the offices in OSD. What I was doing at the time was opening files that were clearly misfiled and either sorting them to our offices, part of that server, or putting them in their own box to be sorted by other responsible your jobs. I mean, this is more like volunteer duty, but yes.
So because you're a workaholic and you're curious and you read a lot, you come across a file that really is what leads us to being here today.
So Matthew Brown says that, first of all, he came across this file in 2018, and he said that the file was saying that Immaculate Constellation is an unacknowledged special access program established after the exposure of ATIP 2017 by former USDI officer Lou Elizondo. And Jeremy Corbell said, and also it seems like it's just a response to the public spillage or exposure that we saw come forward with people like, and specifically Lou Elizondo. This was like an internal classified response to the fact, oh no, some of this is out now. So from watching this, I gather that Immaculate Constellation was a response to the December 16th, 2017 New York Times article where some of the UAP issue did come out. We got the 3 gun camera videos. We got testimony from Commander David Fravor from the USS Nimitz. And we learned about ATIP. And we subsequently learned about OSAP. So this was an effort to contain as much information as they could from further getting leaked to the public.
If you mention certain whistleblowers, who?
David Grush.
You can't mention David Grush in certain professional settings or you are fucked.
Yeah, if you're not fired, you are in for a very rough time, is my understanding.
Elizondo?
I didn't hear Elizondo as a no-go word.
Saying David Grush testified in open Congress, so that makes sense. So what have you seen it happen? Have you seen people mention his name? How do you become aware you can't even talk about him?
So that specific example, heard from a friend at that agency, that was essentially the word of mouth from management. Nothing written in paper, nothing in emails. Mm-hmm. But from what it sounds like, people got a conversation with their leadership and were told as much as we've just gone over. And his name was absolutely, in the first-hand experience, sort of radioactive in the chat rooms. It would either, all of a sudden, these people that never participate are there really slamming him and slamming the people talking about him.
On the classified internet.
Indeed.
Our space is one we've talked about a bunch, but these where people had open dialogue, it just got to clamp down. And his name was part of that. That's what you meant when you said certain people are radioactive. You can't mention their names.
Right.
Okay.
So when Matthew Brown refers to classified chat rooms, he's at least referring to a secure network within the intelligence community called R Space. And as you heard, you cannot bring up David Grush, and if you do, the repercussions can be harsh, which is frankly quite interesting if Matthew Brown is accurate here, because if David Grush's testimony about a crash retrieval and back engineering UFO program doesn't exist, dealing with non-human intelligence, then why would anyone in the intelligence community care at all if anyone brings up David Grush in an R-Space classified chat room? And that ties into Immaculate Constellation. They literally created an entirely new special access program to deal with the spillage that occurred on December 16th, 2017, where we learned about ATIP. We've got the 3 gun camera videos and so forth. So if you look back from December 16th, 2017 to now, and you really pour over everything that's happened, it does make the government look guilty. It does make it look like they're hiding something. There's so many more photos and videos, some of which are not classified, that the U.S. government could release on UFOs, but they don't. And this has been documented, or at least claimed, by multiple very credible people, including Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, David Grush. David Grush in particular talked about how he saw satellite imagery of UFOs, and he doesn't understand why they have not been shared with Congress. But it's just these layers of circumstances that just keeps making the government look like they're hiding something. And it's like it just keeps getting more ridiculous with time.
I know that there is some unclassified information right now in the hands of the government that is the kind of thing that would have some impact, that would change some minds, or at least open some to considering this issue. That information is available to make public. I can't imagine any legitimate argument for classification. And so I'm hoping that with this new pressure from Congress and from people like yourself raising this issue, that information will start to get to the public, to help them better decide for themselves, not to convince them of a particular point of view, but to help them better appreciate what people in the government are seeing, what the military is seeing, and what the bottom line is.
So I think Chris Mellon made a really good point there. That's from his appearance on the Chris Cuomo Project on April 22nd. And he referenced these unclassified videos or photographs that would potentially open some minds, but regarding the UFO topic. But at the very minimum, it would give us more data to make up our own minds. And if it's not classified, why is the government not sharing it? And I mean, in my opinion, the reason they're reluctant to share videos of UAP that are not classified but might be somewhat compelling is because there are people involved with this unclassified information and data that know that it goes deeper, that there are programs being hidden from Congress dealing with UAP. So it's like they don't even want to provide unclassified data because they don't want to make people curious. And they don't want this topic to keep persisting in the media. And yet, that's exactly what it's doing. It's continuing to persist in the media. And I would say that it's not going to go away at this point, and it's only going to get more ridiculous as time goes by, because more whistleblowers are going to come out, and you can't really stop the tide of what's coming. Now, I think Matthew Brown is a very compelling whistleblower, and Jeremy Corbell revealed in a recent Daily Mail article, and I quote, in fact, it dropped today, and I quote, "There's a small army of whistleblowers ready to come forward. We have already recorded with them," Corbell said. "The levee is breaking. The American public has not just a right, but a need to know. So, like I was saying, this isn't going to go away. And I'm going to go ahead and play a clip that really demonstrates how Matthew Brown feels about the level of injustice that is represented by the cover-up.
This isn't just technology. This isn't something somebody came up with in a lab and it's sensitive because once the cat's out of the bag, anybody can do it. Fundamentally, this comes from and is secondary to what we've been told is the biggest question, which is humanity alone? The answer is no. And the secrecy that has been defended is at the cost of, in my mind, human dignity, freedom, and progress. And it is no longer permissible or acceptable in my mind to continue this course, to deprive another generation of not just Americans, but humanity of their birthright to know who they are, where they came from, and what's with us.
That was a mouthful. Matthew speaks in a very rich way. He stated, it's not just protected technology, and I gather from that, he's saying it's more than that. It's not like just protecting aerospace breakthroughs or understandings, they're classifying reality. So it's the American public could definitely understand classifying sensitive technology, but I think if you polled Americans or anybody from any nation, the vast majority would find it repulsive to cover up something so critical about the nature of the universe, that being whether we're alone or not. He also said, that is Matthew Brown, the secrecy that's been defended is at the cost of human dignity and progress, which kind of ties into that. If we're being lied to about our place in the universe, the nature of the universe, the wonder of the universe, which of course we are, right? It wouldn't just be relegated to, oh, we're not alone. It's all of UFO history would have a much different meaning if the cover-up ended, because then we'd have to look back at UFO history and recognize that at the very minimum, some of it is true. And then what does that mean for the nature of the universe when some of that is true? But we're not having that conversation. And so we are being deprived of that conversation, which is an affront to our dignity and it's an affront to our progress. And then he says he doesn't want another generation to be deprived of their birthright to know who they are, where they come from, and what's with us. And I think that's important because I think we'll have a better understanding of who we are and where they, that is us, come from. I'll give you an analogy. It would be like if somehow scientists knew it was highly likely we evolved from primates, but they didn't want to tell humanity because they felt like such knowledge was too proprietary. Think about how unacceptable that would be. But yet we're being lied to about other sentient intelligences in our biosphere. And if some of these sentients are native to Earth, that might give us more hints about who we are as a species. And it might open up new mysteries and new answers about who we are and where we come from. And that's being kept from us by not allowing us to know, as Matthew put it, what's with us.
Just personally, like, what is the step for you to do this? Like, why? I need to understand why. Why are you telling this to everybody
Now.
There's no short answer. It's something, I have many, not even competing, but parallel motivations. But why now? Look out at the world. look inside our country, we are not headed to a good future.
You're concerned.
I am.
Explain the concern.
Ultimately, my biggest fear is what humanity will do to itself out of fear and greed, and what we have done. And we have built a prison around ourselves. It's invisible, but it's not complete. And there is still time to maybe alter our trajectory, have a different future. May not be the best one that we had hoped for, but it's going to be damn sight better than what they have planned for us.
So Matthew stated we're not headed to a good future. His biggest fear is what humanity will do to itself out of fear and greed. So he obviously believes that UFO transparency will nudge the world in a better direction, toward a better direction. He did not elaborate on exactly how that would transpire, but I think part of it is probably because these technologies have the capability of helping the world to solve a lot of environmental problems that we are faced with, and might help us to allow resources to be more available to the entirety of the world, removing scarcity, which would help us to get along better. So that's kind of my guess. But then he went on to say, we have built a prison around ourselves. It's invisible, but it's not complete, and there is still time to maybe alter our trajectory, have a different future. I love that. That's like a line that belongs in the Matrix trilogy, yet he's saying it out of his own perspective as it relates to the UFO cover-up. I have long compared the cover-up to the Matrix, and I don't think it's hyperbole, because an analogy that I've used before is, imagine that world governments covered up the Hawaiian island chain. Nobody would find that acceptable. And if it was covered up for 80 plus years, and then they finally told us, hey, there's this huge, magnificent island chain in the Pacific, we didn't tell you because we found the information to be national security oriented and proprietary. Just imagine how much of a cow academics, scientists, historians, and everyday people would have. And yet covering up the Hawaiian Islands is trivial compared to covering up sentient intelligences in our biosphere. So in that light, I do think we're kind of living in the Matrix, because we have such a limited perception of the true expanded nature of reality, which would be revealed through disclosure, through telling us what they know about these intelligences, that they operate craft, that they might be very interested in our oceans, they're very interested in nuclear energy and power and weaponry. It would open up a door to the abduction phenomenon. And again, as I referenced before, we would look at UFO history completely differently, and we would have to acknowledge that at least some of UFO history is true. And through exploring UFO history, we would realize that there's a lot to reality that we have overlooked. And yet they have closed the door on that. Now, in fairness, the phenomenon has also closed the door on that, because the phenomenon has created a epistemological stalemate, as I've covered many times, where they allow themselves to be noticed in a way where it's easy to believe they exist, because there's so much credible testimony, and in this context, so much credible whistleblower testimony former government personnel, even current government personnel. But they have not allowed us to get that smoking gun piece of evidence. However, it seems like they have absolutely allowed aerospace corporations, intelligence communities, governments and militaries to get reams of smoking gun evidence. And I personally think that's done intentionally for reasons that we can only speculate. But if you want to know my hypothesis on that in a nutshell, it's that they are social engineering us. And the culmination might indeed be disclosure. So they baited governments into a cover-up using extremely advanced artificial intelligence and game planning and God knows what to be able to orchestrate this. And they know that eventually it will come out, and then all of civilization will have to grapple with the prolonged secrecy that they engineered. It's not that governments are not responsible for the lies and the manipulation. It's just that they have been baited into it. It's a complex situation, as you can probably tell. But either way, I'm going to go ahead and play another clip which might tie into the prison that Matthew is referencing. And I think we could interpret that this prison is very multifaceted. I just emphasize the aspect of ignorance. We're in a prison of ignorance, which is what the cover-up promotes, obviously. But he might be referencing more than just that.
I think it's a mix. I think our military, has a long historic involvement in this. So does our intelligence community and our scientific academic community. We have, as a country, allowed ourselves to be penetrated, co-opted, and corrupted by an internationalist force that serves their interests and views nations, peoples as tools and means to an end.
Like a business cabal, international corporations that have no loyalty to any nation, let alone this one.
That's a large part of it. I think we have to go above that too, to start to explain the degree of the level of deception and the level of commitment they've had to maintaining that deception. It's above just monetary gain and power. They're afraid.
Absolutely fascinating statements by Matthew Brown. He speaks of internationalist force that serves their interests and views nations, peoples as tools and means to an end. Now that sounds ridiculous, right? It sounds absolutely insane. However, this is kind of what we're going to have to confront in a post-disclosure world. There are so many things connected to UFO secrecy beyond just the extraordinary possibility that there's sentient intelligences in our biosphere that we're going to have to confront if all of this is true, because it's not going to end at non-human intelligences. I mean, that's just the beginning, but it's certainly not the end, because I mean, even I have a hard time believing that not only is there a cover-up orchestrated by the U.S. government, but it is engaged in by U.S. allies and U.S. adversaries on a deep level. Not like, oh, we're all theorizing, we see things above boats and we see things in the ocean, but we're not sure what they are. But like to the point of crash retrieval programs, recovered craft and bodies. Like they know, the U.S. knows, adversaries know. Obviously, small pockets in these governments, but they know. It's not theory or hypothesis. They know we're not alone. And that level of cooperation is, if it's happening in a post-disclosure world, if that era ever occurs, then we will have to accept that a very sophisticated degree of cooperation unfolded over the decades, because otherwise the secrecy would not have been possible, right? I think we can all agree on that. So a lot of ideas that seem absolutely ridiculous, for lack of, there's a word I'm thinking of, it's escaping me. Outlandish, that's the word I want. A lot of ideas that seem outlandish will suddenly have to be taken seriously. And just like abductions, right? Abductions is a perfect example. If we get disclosure and we learn that we are not alone and there are sentient intelligences in our biosphere, then all of a sudden the idea of abductions is no longer even remotely outlandish. And likewise, if we get disclosure, then the idea that we've been co-opted and corrupted by an internationalist force that serves their interests and views nations, peoples as tools and means to an end, that also will no longer be an absurd possibility. Furthermore, he said something so interesting. He said, I think we have to go above that too, referring to George Knapp's interjection about a business cabal. So he says, I think we have to go above the idea of a business cabal to explain the degree, the level of deception, the level of commitment they've had in maintaining the deception. It's above just monetary gain and power. And then he goes on to say, and I quote, they're afraid. What? They're afraid? What are they afraid of, Matthew Brown? That's a fascinating sentiment. What are they afraid of? And if I had to guess, my guess is they're afraid of how this revelation is going to destabilize the foundations of human civilization. Knowledge is perhaps far more powerful than money, than the economy, than infrastructure. It is the very foundation of the human species. Our collective agreements about reality. Those are even further beneath the economy, the infrastructure, Wall Street. Now we're getting into religion and philosophy. And what does it mean to have a government when there are entities in our biosphere that make governments seem like choir boys in comparison? The very shaking of civilization. The violent shaking of civilization. That's what disclosure is.
You know, there's no going back after you tell us this on camera. We had this conversation. This is it. This is the line in the sand. You're about to cross over here.
Absolutely. I am, on a personal level, giving up the future that I made for myself and was going to try to make for a family. I'm proud of what I accomplished in my time in government, and it's painful to leave the good people there and to know that there really isn't room for people to act according to their conscience and our constitutional ideals on the inside.
Believe it or not, I am actually very sympathetic to the skeptical perspective as applied to UFOs. Because they're not, the skeptics, while some of them are too zealous and I think get into the realm of disingenuousness and faulty arguments, the very idea of just a general skepticism is not illogical even remotely, because it is fair to say, hey, if there's been non-human intelligences engaging our world for 70 plus years and multiple governments have been covering it up, how is it that nobody made a mistake, not on the side of the non-human intelligences and not on the side of the governments, that led to a scientific disclosure that could not be denied? That is not an unfair position. I think it's wrong because I do think we are being engaged by non-human intelligences, and smoking gun evidence exists and is never leaked. But I can understand why people would think that that is outlandish, that kind of scenario persisting. However, let's say the skeptics are correct, and this is all a mind virus that has been persisting for 70 plus years, and we happen to be in a particularly expressive cycle of that mind virus. Well, it would still be fascinating. Why are people coming out of the government like they are, saying this is real, who should have a psychological profile that would prevent such a thing? People who have been entrusted with the most sensitive secrets the United States government has. So that alone is fascinating. I think, frankly, the reason they're coming out, and they've been coming out, is because there's really a UFO cover-up. And I think my position on that will be proven correct in the not too distant future. There's more I want to cover from this interview, but we'll do that in another video. There is an upcoming UFO hearing in May, and that should be interesting. I look forward to that as well. Thank you so much for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my Patreon page. You could check out my YouTube members page. You could give me a one-time donation. All those potentialities can be accessed in the description box below. Or you could just slap a like on this bad boy, and I'll appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Special thanks to all YouTube members, patrons, those that have bought merch, those that have given me a one-time donation. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.